Welcome back, everyone. It is time for what everybody waits for at the end of the year, the worst books of 2022. Now, to be fair, these are books that I read in 2022. These are not books that were published in 2022, necessarily. I think maybe one of them was, but anyway, regardless. This is just about when I read them. Now, some of these are not actually 1 or 2 stars. I actually rated at least one of these, I think maybe even 2 of these, a 3-star. The reason that they are on my worst books list, though, is because of the lost potential. Like, some of the books in this list are just bad. They're just bad books. But some of them could have been so much better and just, chose not to be. For the ones that are just bad books, honestly, I'm like Han Solo. But for the ones that had potential, that's where I'm actually very disappointed and upset. I'm more upset because it could have been better, but it chose not to be. So, without further ado, let's get into it. My first 1-star read, this is going to be a hot take because I feel like a huge amount of BookTube absolutely loved this book, and it was either 4 or 5 stars. This book is a 4.46 average rating out of 1,710,682 reviews on Goodreads. You guessed it, it's The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I rated it 1 star. Here's the thing. I don't think it was a terribly written book at all. I think it was heavy-handed at times, a lot of times. I think the writing was a little immature depending on which character was speaking. I think the intent was that the character was supposed to sound a bit immature and inexperienced, but the writing is what felt immature. It's like the writer didn't know how to successfully write an immature character. I don't know that I would have done any better, but when reading it, it felt very awkward to me. That was not my only critique of the book, however. It's a 1 star for me on principle. I did not like the twist. I didn't feel that this book needed a twist at all. I think it was completely unnecessary to the story. You could have cut out a few characters of this book. You would literally have the exact same book. They were completely irrelevant except to have a plot twist. I don't think that is a successfully executed plot twist then. If a character exists only for the shock value of what that reveal comes as later, but it has actually no bearing on the story, on the characters, on the events, why is it there? Why do you need that? So I didn't like it. I thought it was a completely unnecessary plot twist, total waste of space. In addition, I didn't care for who was used for the plot device for the twist. I really can't divulge any more than that because I don't want to give away spoilers. A lot of people love this book. A lot of people probably have this on their TBRs. And if they want to read it, I'm not going to spoil it for them. I really didn't care for it. While I understand why people love this book, I understand why people give it 4 stars, 5 stars, there was something so jarring about the use of the character or the characters for the plot device that it felt icky. It gave me a little ick. If you want a spoiler-filled description and explanation of why I disliked it so much that I gave it a 1 star, let me know down in the comments below. I would be happy to make a separate video. Not for me. It just wasn't for me. I felt like the community that was used as a throwaway character was done a little dirty, basically. So anyway, I didn't care for it. So my review on The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo was a big fat no. The next book, and probably actually the most frustrating book I read, this is probably my least favorite of the year. I actually DNF'd. I could not get through it. This is also a very polarizing book. It has a 3.93 rating average on Goodreads out of 239,386 reviews. Mine is one of the few 1 stars. Only 2% of people gave this book a 1 star. This is 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. This is not to say that I will never read Murakami. I have wanted to read him for this whole year after I really discovered some of his works through a lot of other booktubers. I'm very interested in his writing, and this book was on sale, which is why I started with it. And this is apparently very different from most of his work. This is like a full-on novel. It's not, some of his others are like novellas or very short novels, if you want to call them that. I didn't care for it. I felt like he chose to write some groups of people that are decent people as villains. I didn't like that. He chose to write some people that are villains as decent people or misunderstood or neutral. And that's where you really lost me. That's not okay. And it's not to say that, oh, in the story, he had a villain. That's fine. Have the worst, most evil villain you can think of. But as an author, to write that villain in a way that you're trying to convey to the reader that that person's not really a bad person, nope. And when it comes to the topic that this book actually talked about, no. I'm not going there. So this book is the story of a young woman who is actually an assassin by trade. She taught herself how to effectively kill with an ice pick to the brainstem. Very interesting premise. Who does she choose to kill? Men who abuse women. Okay. That's also an interesting premise. I'm down with that. When you start writing characters that are just deep down gross, evil people, and you want to try to portray them as though they're not, it's just that society doesn't understand their feelings and it's the victim's fault for being so seductive. No. Just no. I'm not doing it. I DNF'd it. It was very upsetting. And oddly enough, this is not putting me off from trying anything else from Murakami. It's just this one is a hard pass for me. I just really didn't like it. Then there's this whole subplot about how they're sort of in an alternate universe where there's 2 moons and there's not supposed to be 2 moons, and things that didn't happen everybody else remembers, and things that are not remembered actually happen, but nobody remembers them. It's this entire plot that's supposed to be the main plot, but I don't know. It wasn't for me. If you liked it, if you enjoyed it, I don't get it, but you know what? There's maybe layers and levels that just went over my head. For me, hard pass. Could not finish it. I couldn't even stomach it, honestly. So 1Q84 Haruki Murakami, no, I'm not going back for. Biggest disappointment of 2022.
Hold, please.
Support. This is Cameron. Oh, Hidoki? I'm not aware of that.
Five minutes later.
Okay, so I said the last book was my biggest disappointment of the year. You know what? I don't know. I'm a little back and forth. This book irked me. I was this is one of the ones where this was such an interesting premise, and I feel like it failed so hard at delivering, and that's why this one made me mad. I actually gave it 3 stars, I think. No, I did. I gave it 2 stars. Okay, I was honest. I gave it 2 stars. This has an average 3.17 star rating off of 3,053 reviews in Goodreads. I'm surprised there's actually so few reviews of this, to be honest. This was released in 2021, so yeah, I would have thought there'd be more. This was The Shadow in the Glass by J.J.A. Harwood. Harwood, not hardwood. Wood is typically hard, but this is Harwood. This is supposedly a gothic retelling, reimagining of Cinderella that's supposed to be quite dark. Okay, cool. So the dark element is that she does not have exactly a fairy godmother. She has what seems to be closer to a genie, or I think it's a djinn, where it's kind of a deal with the devil. Her wishes get granted, but at a price, and she has to figure out what that price is, and is it worth it for her wishes. Okay. That actually sounds like a really interesting premise. What good could you do with your wishes versus what ill could you bring on the world by being irresponsible or, knowing what's going to happen and not caring? Really liked the premise. Hated the execution. First of all, she spends so much time in this book talking about how she's got to be careful with her wishes. She's only got 5, and the 5th one is going to cost her soul. So she swears to never use the 5th wish. She's going to only use 4 wishes. So she's got to be careful. She's got to be really careful. She's got to be really careful. What does she go and do? She uses her first wish as a test. I get it. She then wishes something by accident for her second one. After 30 times saying how careful she has to be. And at that point, I almost put the book down because, first of all, I was sick of hearing her inner monologue talking about how careful she's got to be. It was getting so redundant. But then that she went and just wasted it. And I'm like, oh no, this is going to be a dumb female protagonist. I can't. I gave it another shot and I'm like, all right, let's wait and see what her third one is. Because that'll be kind of the deciding factor, right? This character was just dumb. Just made dumb decisions. So dumb. So repetitive. So wasteful on plot. And it had such an interesting premise. And you could start to see that threads were being woven in from her tragic backstory that it never actually talks about. It could have been I had this whole thing oh, that's a hint at this, that's a hint at this. And I was thinking there was going to be this really intricate backstory about, when her mom died and how she was adopted by her mom's friend. And this was going to explain so many things about her past seemed to tie in so closely to what's happening to her now. And then the book never gets to it. It never comments on them. And I'm like, that was the whole, that would have been the thing to make it a good book. That would have been the thing to tie it together. It would have explained some of her actions. It's like the author got 80% of the way of laying that framework and then was like, oh no, deadline. Bup, the end. Everything's fine now. The most interesting part of the story that the foundation had been built up for just never came through. How do you write 80% of a backstory of leaving the clues in the trail and then just never do anything with it? Where was the editor for this book? Was it the editor who chopped this out? I don't understand. Oh, this book made me so angry. That if she had woven together the backstory into present day, easily would have given it 3 stars, maybe even 3.5. I would have been able to forgive a lot of shenanigans by this character. As it stood, I can't. It was really disappointing. And also, don't market something. Don't fake me out on marketing. Don't blurb the back of the book like this is actually going to be something that it's not. That is such a pet peeve of mine. This is barely a retelling or an inspired by Cinderella story. This is way more like a genie in a lamp situation, and there were so few tie-ins except her name being Ella. Yes, there were two other things that kind of tied into Cinderella. One of them doesn't appear until the last couple pages of the book. And it wasn't until after I finished it and I was typing up my review that I went, oh, that was supposed to be a Cinderella callback. In the last 20 pages. No. Just make it a brand new fairy tale. What's wrong with that? Don't lie to me about what your book is about. So yeah, 2 stars for The Shadow in the Glass. This one just made me angry. The next book I have is The Gradual by Christopher Priest. This has 3.7 stars out of 608 ratings. Not a lot of people have read this book, but those who've read it seem to think pretty highly of it. This is a book that I kind of half DNF'd. I could not get through it. And it was going to be returned in Libby, so I'm like, fine, take it. I'll pick it up later. I didn't intend to just forever DNF it, but I'm like, whatever, go. Nobody else checked it out after me, so I came back to it like maybe a month later, and I finally finished it. I forced myself to finish it. Again, this was to me like Shadow in the Glass, where this had a really interesting premise, but then the book didn't match the premise at all. So there's a guy whose brother goes off to war when he's a child, and his brother just disappears. They never hear from him again, never see him again. None of the people from his brother's regiment ever show up again. So he becomes an adult, he becomes a musical composer, and he ends up going to this group of islands. It's basically Russia, okay? They're in Russia. It's fake Russia, but whatever, it's Russia. There's these islands off the coast of his mainland that aren't supposed to exist based on the official government propaganda. Okay, so he sees these islands, he can literally see them from his bedroom window.
And I can see Russia from my house.
I'm not sure why the propaganda machine even attempted to say that they weren't. He goes to these islands on a government-sanctioned trip. I'm confused already. And this whole orchestra is sent as this like envoy to kind of establish relations or make better relations with these non-existent islands. So after 8-9 weeks, they come back, and it turns out they've all lost 2 years of their lives. Their families have moved on. If they were married, they're likely divorced now. Their spouses might have even been remarried because they just up and left for 2 years. So they find out that time flows really weird in these islands. It flows faster between some, it flows slower between some. It's all kinds of messed up. And he decides he's going to figure out what the heck is going on. And I'm like, cool premise. He's got a missing brother. He finds islands where time is soup, okay? Time is just soup. And he's like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to go find my brother. That would be great if that's what the book was about. So take the brother part, just forget about it. Just throw that away. His brother is mentioned for the first few chapters and then basically never again. The rest of the book is this guy going around the islands the first time, coming back home, realizing he's lost everything, which was like one relationship, and then going back to the islands. To master time? No, just to be a tourist. Just to go on a boat between the islands and complain the entire time about what he has to do at every island arrival to fix how much time he's gained or lost. It's mostly just boats and complaining. And I couldn't with this man. By the time he got to the end where all of his questions were actually starting to be answered about how time works, he got real whiny and just didn't want to listen to the explanation. I'm like, no, I earned this explanation. I deserve to know what's going on. I don't care if you don't want to. You sit down and you shut up and you listen to this person. You never figure out what the heck is going on. He just like, it clicks in his brain and then he's good at it. Like, what? What are you talking about? Oh, and then his brother does come back for like the last like 3 chapters. The chapters are wildly short. There's like 80 some chapters in this book, but they're like a page and a half each, which is also completely unnecessary. Don't do that. But yeah, his brother appears for the last few chapters, so it's like tiny bit of brother interesting stuff, giant section in the middle where nothing happens but man whining, and then tiny section at the end where it's like, oh yeah, the story was supposed to be about his missing brother. We should probably wrap that up somehow. How does it get wrapped up? It doesn't. It's just the writer was, again, deadline. And then he found his brother. Or did he? Like, 2 stars. And finally, my last bad book of 2022. This one, I'm not actually going to say it's a bad book. I actually rated this 3 stars. This was more of a, oh man, I really saw where you were going with this. I just feel, I feel like you just didn't quite make the full jump. It's like those cats that they think they're going to jump, but then they chicken out partway through and their legs give out and they just, instead of going, they just kind of boop and just fall. That's what this book felt like. Interesting premise. Almost interesting execution. Not quite. So the premise is, it's the near future, and surprise, surprise, we've pretty much destroyed the planet. That's partly why I liked the idea of this book. It was supposedly a commentary on climate change and the fact that we're running out of time and the cataclysm that's about to happen because we just are insistent on destroying our planet. This guy's mother was one of the best scientists in the world when it came to genetic manipulation and alteration. And through some very well-meaning experiments, she was going to help make the world a better place because nobody else was stepping up to the plate. And what happened was a disastrous miscalculation on the effect of ecosystem after ecosystem after ecosystem. And so it decimated the food supply, which decimated the livestock supply, which further decimated the food supply, which caused the Great Starvation and killed like 1 million people or some huge billion, not million. I'm sorry. It killed like 1/7 or 1/8 of the world's population. So we're talking 1 billion here. I don't know. A ton of people died. This book was a lot, okay? Bunch of people died. There's like no meat anywhere in the world unless you're willing to like pay thousands of dollars for like a fish. It was really bad. So, of course, what does the governments of the world do, especially the United States? Outlawed genetic scientists. Are you a scientist who worked in genetics? You're either behind bars or you are now in a government lab that is highly regulated and controlled and monitored, and you're working for them. You're not working for the greater good. So this guy, as part of penance for his mom kind of, screwing up the entire planet, decides to join the government to search out the scientists who are still, black ops sciencing, and bring them to justice. Turns out his mom had a backup plan, and so when she realized that she kind of messed up, she decided to fix it by messing up more, which was to create a genetic upgrade to the human race and then infect her kid with it. Now, he's a grown adult, sure. Still did not consent to basically be turned into another species. So he is stronger, faster, smarter. He's the $1 million man. He's the bionic man.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the capability to make the world's first bionic man better, stronger, faster.
But he's now on the run because he's kind of a big risk. So that's sort of what it's following. There's a lot of scientific jargon about genetics. Honestly, I didn't have a problem with that. It was a little heavy to wade through at times, but audiobook was the way to go. It was still digestible, even though it was kind of a lot. And I mean, it's a science fiction. I'm not going to complain that it was, heavy on the science part of it. Whether it was actually based on anything real, I don't know. I am not a smart person, so I can't tell you. I'm not a smart person, but I'm not a genetic scientist, okay? The reason she infected her kid is to create the superhuman so that he can figure out how to save the human race and hopefully maybe the planet as well. Okay, so we have commentary on climate change. Love it. We have what should be a commentary on messing with things you don't understand the consequences of. We have, as it comes to the food, as it regards to ecosystems, the food chain. Then we have what should be commentary on messing with the human genetic structure that you are hoping is going to help, but you don't know. Okay, we're getting into some dicey territory here. You should learn something from these first 3 commentaries, but where the book fails is that it just perpetuates it. Instead of looking and saying, we probably shouldn't mess with things we don't understand the consequences of, because we've already basically accelerated the death of the human species by doing it once. Maybe we just knock it off. No, they didn't learn that lesson. They're like, okay, I learned my lesson, so now I'm gonna fix it differently because I learned my lesson from the first one. And then it leaves. So, okay, if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna not learn your lesson and you're gonna do another thing that you shouldn't do, at least have the decency to say whether or not it worked, because that's really the commentary here, isn't it? Because even though I understand the sentiment behind it, and I understand why the character chose to do what they chose to do in the end, I still feel like, sir, you're like super smart now, and I feel like you still didn't learn your lesson, because I can already think of a few ways that could go very, very badly. So I don't know if the author just kind of ran out of ideas on how to fix the planet or what, but they were going to stick to their guns that altering the genetic structure of things, hoping you get it right this time, is an okay path to take. I disagree with that fundamentally. But it wasn't a badly written book. It wasn't not enjoyable. And it was the first sci-fi that I have read since like high school. So I was very happy to kind of dip my toes back into the waters. I don't think it was a bad start, but it's on the list because even though I felt like it was a 3-star read, it was decent. It was very disappointing in that I felt like it could have been so much more. I felt like it could have commented so much more on why and how we got to this point of destroying the Earth. And I felt like it could have had a much better conversation about how, the Earth should be treated and the solutions that you should be looking for to treating the Earth with respect, because your very survival depends on it. So it fell short, but I thought it was a good first try. What I found interesting is when I don't even know what the Goodreads Book Awards are. I've just started using Goodreads. This is my first year reading since I got my job, which is why I stopped reading, was because 13 years ago I got this job and it sucked the soul out of my body. And reading is a huge part of that soul that I kind of need. I don't know anything about BookTube or Goodreads or the overall community. I'm still just baby stepping it here. So I was watching a video from, I think it was Jess Owens, and she was going through the book awards, nominees. And I saw this on there for sci-fi, and I'm like, in my head, my first reaction was, oh, I read that. And then my second reaction was, why is that on the Goodreads Book Award list for Best Sci-Fi of the Year? And third was, I wonder if they didn't have many sci-fis that got published this year. Because it was fine, but I do not think that this should have been a nominee for the Best Sci-Fi of the Year, by far. So I don't know. But this came out July 7th, 2022. So this was probably the most current recent new book that I read. Now, I do have one honorable mention. This is another hot take. People are not gonna like me, and you know what? I'm okay with that. This is a 4.17 star average rating out of 1,292,656 reviews. I did give this book myself a 3-star rating. It's not that it was badly written, it's that I hated the plot twist. This, similarly to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I felt that the plot twist was bad. I actually saw it coming, which surprised me because I never see plot twists coming. I never know what the twist... I don't even know when I'm reading a book that is going to have a plot twist, much less know what that plot twist will be. I'm so bad at that. I was so irritated by this plot twist, and I was irritated by this book in general. So the story is, there is a patient in a mental facility who was there because she shot her husband in the face a bunch of times. It's 5 times or something. And ever since she was arrested, she was found over the body with a gun in her hand. There's no question she did it. She never spoke another word. She didn't talk to her lawyer. She didn't speak in court. She was basically ruled as not mentally fit to be convicted as a criminal because she clearly had some sort of mental break. And there's a therapist obsessed with her case. So he does a bunch of weird stuff, like transfers to another facility, takes a new job because he finds out that this patient that fascinates him is at this other facility. Then he starts like insisting that he have one-on-one sessions with her with nobody else in the room. He wants to change her medication like day one after not even having observed her other than like one meeting. He starts wanting to like interview her family, and it's just like, dude, creepy, creeped me out. Also, what kind of therapist is allowed to do any of this at all? There are so many safeties that are supposed to be in place to protect not only the patients from abuse in these kinds of facilities, but also to protect the staff. And this guy is just like, safeguards, schmafeguards. I really want to mess with this person's head and yank her out of whatever she's in. Hated that. I hated every time he crossed lines when it came to doctor-patient relationship, mental health professional, and mental health patient. Like, all of it was just irritating to me, because on what planet would he get away with this? Ugh, didn't like it. So it's told in a split perspective of him having interviews and trying to solve the mystery of this patient, and then it's her memories of leading up to the event. Again, it was written fine. Like, the guy I thought was a good writer. I just thought he wrote weird, creepy characters that like weren't intentionally creepy. Like, you're supposed to be rooting for this guy. You're supposed to think like, yes, fix her, figure out this mystery. And I'm just like, Sir. So that's my honorable mention. That book irritated me, and I do not understand why so many people loved it. I'm like, this is a bad therapy. Like, if I had to go to therapy, I probably do need therapy. If I had to go to therapy, or if I had to be institutionalized because of a severe mental break, and this is how my doctors behaved, no. Sir, no. Step back. So that is my list of my worst reads for 2022. But you know what? I finished 74 books this year. It is December 27th. I have a goal of 75 books this year. And if I make it, well, I've already read more books this year than I have ever read in a year that I can remember. I think the most that I remember doing was when I was in school, and I think I managed like 52 books. I think I managed like one book a week. I'm thrilled. And so many of the books that I read were fantastic. I found my absolute favorite book of all time this year. It's the first book I read this year. It's what just propelled me forward to dive headlong back into reading. I just binged on my favorite YouTube creators that I just discovered this year. I didn't know BookTube existed until I started reading again. I've had one heck of a year, and even though I read some pretty bad books, overall, I am absolutely thrilled. I am absolutely thrilled with what I read this year. I cannot wait to make my best books of 2022 video. I'm hoping that'll be next week, but I don't know because I'll have to do my end of year wrap up, or my December wrap up, and then maybe a best books or a 2022 wrap up or something will be coming out after that. I'm not really sure. I'm just chaos right now. I don't know. I don't have a plan. I just sit down and start talking. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Don't read these books. Don't. I did this so that you don't have to. So please don't read these. Unless, you know what, The Silent Patient. Again, I kind of get why people like it. It's definitely not the worst book I've read. Keep in mind if you do read it that that's not normal though. So just, tuck that away. So yeah, that is all I have. I'm going to finish my tea. I'm going to finish my day, and I will see you in my next one.